Hi, it's Terry Gaines. Happy World Card Making Day. In this video, I'm going to share 3 card designs created with the same product. The product I'm using for my cards is Pretty Peacock cardstock, Lost Lagoon cardstock, Basic White, and 3 of the different designs from the Winter Meadow Designer Series paper in the September through December mini catalog. The product I'm using for my samples is the Heartfelt Hexagon bundle, which is the stamp set and the punch. I'm using the Earth and Textures dies for one of my cards. I'm also on that same card, I'm using the basic 3D folders. The beauty of creating is you can use any color cardstock, any designer series paper, and duplicate these cards. If you found me via YouTube, there's a direct link to my blog post in the text portion of this video where you can download a PDF that's giving you all the details for the supplies and the product used, card or details on how to cut the cardstock, diagrams for all 3 of the different card designs. And keep watching this video and you can get all the details for all 3 cards. The beauty of this is it's pre-recorded, so you can pause, you can create with me at the same time, so you can pause and cut as I'm cutting, rewind, you can watch it, come back and rewatch it. There's a lot of flexibility when it's pre-recorded. I hope you enjoyed these cards. Have an amazing World Card Making Day and happy creating. For card A, our card base is 8.5 by 5.5, scored at 4 1/4. So our card bases are already cut to size. So what we want to do is score them at 4 1/4. So you can use your paper trimmer with a scoring blade, or you can fold them in half and use a bone folder to fold and crease those. Since I have my my scoring blade and trimmer right here, I'm going to go ahead and score those. So those are scored and ready to fold at 4 1/4. The designer series paper is 2 3/8 by 5.5. They are already cut at 2 3/8 in the card kit packet, and they're 6 inches in height. So what I'm going to do is cut them to be 5.5. So I'm going to cut each one of these a 1/2 inch off, so we have those at the right dimension. And then when you do that, you kind of have to look at each end to say, okay, which side do I want to trim off? And sometimes it's easy decision. Sometimes it's just a toss-up. It's going to be equally the same on either side. So each of these now are at 5.5, so they're cut and ready. For the basic white, there are 2 of the basic whites that are already 8.5 by 5.5. And what we want to do is cut both of them at 3 inches and then cut that 3-inch section in half, so we get 2 that are 4 1/4 by 3. So I'm going to take 3 inches and cut that off. This is going to be extra. It's a 2.5 inch strip, and then rotate this and cut this at 4 1/4. These are going to be for the inside sentiments for the card. We're making 3 cards, so we need 3 of those. So I'm going to do that for both of these pieces. And then we'll have our inside sentiment. And this is going to be extra. One of these is going to be extra. And the other piece is going to be for our sentiments. So let's go ahead and take care of our sentiments first. So I'm going to use the Heartfelt Hexagon stamp set, and I'm going to take 3 of the sentiments and stamp on here. I am going to use my silicone craft mat underneath. It gives you a little bit of a cushion when you're using photopolymer. So I'm going to start out by stamping the first one with the With Sincere Sympathy. So just tap your ink on here. So I'm going to just tap it so it's on the surface. I'm going to stamp this one right in the center. Center, top and bottom, center, left and right. I'm going to hold even pressure down so I get a good image in time for the ink to absorb. I just wanted my ink on the surface of the stamp to do that. Then what I'm going to do, I just want to repeat through the same sentiments I stamped on these other ones. So I'm going to start out, the next one is going to be the sending you lots of love and hugs. So tap that ink on. I'm going to look at equal spacing on between this sentiment and the edge of the paper. Hold that down to get a time for the ink to absorb and get a good coverage on that. And then for this next one, I'm actually going to rotate it this way. And I want to stamp this off on scratch paper. And I happen not to bring, I'm going to just grab it here. I have a piece of scratch paper right down here, grid paper. I'm going to slide this in and use that. And what I'm going to do is take this floral image, I'm going to stamp this on my scratch paper and then stamp it on my paper here to get a soft image. Then I'm going to take this sentiment and stamp it over. Now you can see that I was not being careful. I pushed it in too far into the ink pad. I got ink on the ink pad, ink on my fingers, but as long as I didn't rock my stamp, I was going to be okay. So I have a simply or a chamois over here. I'll clean all of that off. So now let's punch these. I like to stamp first and then come in and punch. So this hexagon punch will come in here and then you can line that up. Look for what kind of spacing you want on all sides of that and punch that out. So we have that one. Then we have the with sympathy. I'm going to punch that one out. Now this one, I rotated it this way because I already knew I wanted to stamp it this way. So I'm going to rotate it and look for lining that up, and I have that. Now what I'm going to do is, because you have all these extra images in here, you have this cute image here that you can add to your project, but I wanted to stamp and punch this part out first because that's going to help me know where I want to stamp this next image. So I'm going to ink this up. Let's see, I'm going to stamp it this way. This way I can place that here and put that alignment like so. So I do that part after I do the initial stamping and punching. So hopefully that makes sense. So now these are all ready for our project and we are ready to assemble our card. So let's go back to our card base. I'm going to grab just one of these, and I have a card base. I have an inside sentiment. Let me move the rest of this out of the way. And then I'm going to grab one of these. So we're done with this, unless you want to look at for the visual. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and put my designer series paper on the front of the card. Now it is the same height as the card base. I'm going to bring my trimmer back in place. I almost said simply scoring because I typically grab my simply scoring blade. Both of them have a wall. The wall on the trimmer is smaller wall than the wall on a simply scoring, but both will work. So what I'm going to do is put adhesive on the back of my designer series paper. I already told you that this is the same height as the cardstock. So I'm going to push the cardstock or the card base up to the wall. I'm going to hold this so my adhesive does not touch the cardstock. I'm going to push that edge up to the wall and then let this come down and fall into place. That helps me get that squared. And then if these two were not equal, I could trim them off and make them equal. But I did an okay job on that. Now you can put that aside. Now what I'm going to do, I'm not going to stamp an inside sentiment on my card, but I'm going to go ahead and attach this to the inside of the card. Now I made this size for a couple reasons. One, to maximize our cardstock, we can get more of these smaller pieces out than a larger piece, and also it showcases the beautiful color of the card base. So that's the inside. And now for the sentiment And I'm going to actually put this one on this one because I stamped that floral image because I thought it goes well with that image. I'm going to put mine on with dimensionals. You can use any type of adhesive to do this, and these are so strong. 4 is great plenty. I'm going to take my take your pick tool, get the backings off, and then you can place this however you want on your card. I'm going to overlap it a little bit. So that is for card A. I'm only going to assemble one. The other 2 will be assembled, and you can decide which side of the designer series paper you want to use for your card and which stamp set you want to use for your outside sentiments. Happy creating! So let me share the details for card B. For card B, we're going to be able to create 3 of these cards. Our card base is 6 7/8 by 5.5. So we want to take our 8.5 by 5.5 and cut them at 6 7/8. So that's 1/8 away from being 7 inches. So, and then before I move it, I'm going to score it at the 4 1/4. So it's 6 7/8 by 5.5, scored and folded at 4 1/4. So all 3 of these need to be cut at 6 7/8. We're going to save these side pieces, these extra pieces, for embellishing the card. And we want to score it at 4 1/4. So we have 2 pretty peacock and 1 lost lagoon. We're going to get all of those cut. So cut, save those images, and then, or save those edges, put it at 4 1/4 and score. So now we have our card bases done. The designer series paper is 2 3/8 by 5 1/4, and they're already at 2 3/8 if you have one of my packets. So we're going to cut this at 5 1/4, and I'm going to share why I rotated that. I rotated that because I had a little bit more white space on the top, and I needed to cut about 3/4 of an inch off. So I just am deciding, do I want to cut it off the top or the bottom? I don't want to cut it off either side on this one, but I'm going to cut it off on that side. And sometimes you have, it's pretty obvious which side you want to trim off that extra, and sometimes it's a toss-up. So all 3 of these need to be 5 1/4 inches. So we got those 3 cut. Now our inside layer for the inside sentiment is 4 by 5 1/4. Now I have 2 diagrams on the PDF, and they're both for the basic white. One of the basic whites, we're going to get 2 of them out of. The other, we're going to get the 3rd one, and then the extra here is for the outside sentiments. So the number 1 with the 0 is telling you that's your first cut. So the first cut on the first piece is at 5 1/4. So I'm going to cut that at 5 1/4. And I just have a 1/4 inch strip extra. Rotate it and make a 4-inch cut. So we have 1 of those, and then you can get 1 more out of here, and then your surplus on this one is going to be a 1/2 inch strip. Now if you like stamping sentiments on these and creating little banners, you can put those aside and use it for another project. Now the next piece, we only need 1 out, so I'm going to make my first cut at 4 and my second cut at 5 1/4. That way I maximize that extra piece that's left over. So we're going to put this one at 5 1/4, and this will have just a little 1/4 inch extra. So I'm just going to set this aside. I'm going to bring it back in a moment, but for now I'm just going to set this aside and bring that back a little bit later. So let's talk about stamping our sentiments and these extra pieces we have. So these pieces can be considered scrap pieces unless you have a project for those small pieces. So we're going to stamp our sentiments on here. I'm going to stamp 3 sentiments. I'm actually going to put my silicone craft mat underneath it. It gives you a little bit of cushion. These are photopolymer stamps that I'm going to use. I'm going to use Pretty Peacock for my ink pad color. So the first stamp I'm going to stamp is the one that says sending you lots of love and hugs. I'm going to tap the ink on, get good coverage, and I'm going to stamp this one right here. I'm going to hold it, give it time for the ink to absorb into the paper. I got a solid image around the U, and it's always good just to tap it and get your ink just on the surface. Once you get into the crevices, you really have too much ink. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate this like so, and I'm going to first take this floral image, ink this up, and I'm going to stamp this over on this edge, and then I'm going to lift it up and stamp it again over on this side. So now I have the full strength Pretty Peacock, and here I have this second generation. For the second generation, I'm going to take the With Sincere Sympathy image or sentiment and stamp that. And you can see I tipped it. I got excess ink on the block. I'm good as long as I don't tip it onto my cardstock. And off to the side here, I have my chamois to clean all of those. Now on this one, I'm going to take Mr. and Mrs. and I did the very same thing on this. I tipped it and got ink onto the block, but I'm okay as long as I don't hit my cardstock. And you can see I always get ink on my fingers when I stamp. So now I have my sentiment stamped. Now I like to stamp and then bring the punch in and punch them up. That's my preference. You can always punch your cardstock first and then stamp, or punch first then stamp. I like to do it this way. So now I can look at this to see how I want this alignment to be to cut that out. And then I'm going to turn this one this way, but I actually want to view it this way so you can rotate it, and that looks good. Punch that out. So this extra piece is for stamping those sentiments. Now these extra pieces are going to help with our layering to add some color to these edges here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and do that first. So what I'm going to do, I only need one of the Lost Lagoon on how I'm putting this card together. I'm going to rotate this way. I can't get the full piece out. This is that excess piece, but I'm going to have one of those. On one of the Pretty Peacock, I'm going to do the same thing and get one of those. For the second one, I'm going to rotate it this way and get two of these out. Okay, so we have that. So now, before we start assembling the card, I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with these extra pieces here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over so you can see it on the white. I'm going to put this behind to add some color, to get some color behind here. I'm going to add this one just on this edge. Now this edge is the edge that's going to hang over on my card, and so I'm not adding in on that side, and you're not going to see it here. I'm going to add that one like that, and I'm going to add this one like that. So how I'm going to do that is I'm just going to turn these two over, put some adhesive on just the half of that. Now I'm going to line this up, and you can choose how much you want to see of that. I'm going to do the same thing here for this one. And then for this one, I'm going to bring the trimmer back in. The reason I'm bringing the trimmer back in is I want these to be flush, and I'm going to use that wall. The other thing I want to make sure is this is going to hang over the edge. So I want this one to be on top. So I'm going to put that last. What I mean is if I put that one on top, my edge of my card, you're going to see that seam. I want that one to be on the, I'm saying the top, but it's really the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over and put some adhesive here. I'm going to push this all the way to the wall. Then I'm going to push this white one all the way to the wall, decide how much of this I want to visually see. Now I'm going to turn this one over, add some adhesive here, put this one up to the wall, and try to get equal spacing on this side. Hopefully that all makes sense. So now I've added some color, and that was with that extra piece that we cut off for the card base. So now let's assemble one of our cards. So I'm going to, let's just grab this one. And so we have a card base with designer series paper, and then we have the layer here. So our score mark is in here, so I'm going to fold that, take my bone folder and crease that. I'm done with this, so I can move that out of the way. Actually, I'm not. I'm going to adhere the basic white layer first. And the reason I'm adhering this layer first is I'm going to use this for alignment for my designer series paper layer when I add that. So this piece goes on this inside layer. I like to rotate it so I visually can see these three sides. So it's really the right side, the top and the bottom, if you were to rotate it the right way. So I like to do that. I let this side just fall into place. If it happens to be narrower there, that's totally okay because it camouflages right into the next panel. Now I like to turn this down. Now the reason I like to put this on second is I can use this for alignment to get my spacing correct on the top and the bottom. For some of the designer series paper, you're going to have the option of which side you use. For this one, the color doesn't coordinate as well, so you're going to most likely want to use this side, the same that I'm using. But the beauty of designer series paper, you have the option to choose either side. Now, when I put this on, I'm looking for spacing here and here, and then my equal spacing on the sides. So that is the card base, added the layers. Now this is where I'm going to put that sentiment on, and this is where I mentioned I want to make sure I don't have that extra seam if I rotated those two. Now if you have extra cardstock, you would have the same scenario because we're extending this cardstock. It's not like it's the same size anyway. So we're going to go back to this. I want to use dimensionals to adhere this, and so I'm going to bring in my dimensionals, but we don't want any adhesive to be exposed here. My trick to do that is to bring your dimensionals and place them on the panel. You just need to make sure that they're within this space here. So and what I mean is they're not higher than this image. They're within that space of the image. I'm going to take this, rotate it this way, and put one dimensional here. So what that's going to allow me to do when I take these backings off, it's going to allow me to not have any exposed adhesive. So I've defined the adhesive here. This one's over here. So I really have the freedom to move this anywhere I want to, as long as I'm covering those two dimensionals up. And I'm going to have that hang out place about right here. Now I don't have any exposed adhesive, and I utilize those extra pieces. So you would repeat this process for the other two cards. And I created this one, and on this one you can choose whether you want this side of the paper or that side of the paper, and that's the same with this. You can choose that side of the paper or that side of the paper. And this is card B. Happy creating! For card C, the card base is 7 1/4 by 5 1/2, scored at 4 1/4. To save some video time, I have all the pieces already cut to size. So I cut the card base to 7 1/4, and then I scored it at 4 1/4 and folded it. So I did that for both of the card bases. So I have both of those done in the pretty peacock color. Now I am saving that little piece that was cut off, that extra, that's going to help embellish the card. So I am saving that. Then for the Lost Lagoon, I have a diagram on the PDF that we want two of them, two panels that are 2 3/4 by 4 3/4. So I made that first cut here at 2 3/4. I made the next cut at 2 3/4. Then I cut both of those to be 5 1/4. So we have 2 panels that are cut 2 3/4 by 5 1/4. And this extra piece is actually extra. I didn't use that at all on my card. So I'm going to set that aside. That'll be an extra piece for a future project. So one of the basic whites, you need to cut 2 panels that are 4 by 5 1/4. So I made the 5 1/4 cut first and then cut 2 at 4. And that got these 2 panels. So I did that ahead of time here. And then for the second basic white, that is 8 1/2 by 5 1/2, I got 2 panels that are 2 1/2 by 5. So I cut 2 1/2, another 2 1/2, cut both of those at 5. So I got those. And then this extra piece here is extra also. I did not use that for this project, but you could utilize that for sentiments if you wanted to add sentiments to the outside of the card. Now for the designer series paper, I used the designer series paper, the background side, to help embellish the cards. I used these 2 prints, but I did not use this print, and that can be used for a future project. So I got all of this pre-cut to save some video time. Now I want to talk about how I die cut images from the designer series paper, the extra pretty peacock, and the Lost Lagoon layer. Now this Lost Lagoon layer is going to be sandwiched between a basic white and the card front, that we can utilize this to cut out images, and that's what I did. So I'll talk about this one first. So what I did for this one is I took the tall planter and I cut this out along with this image. So what I did was I placed these in, make sure that I had some space around the edge because I didn't want to go too close to the edge. Otherwise, if I did, it would be visible when this gets layered. So for both of these pieces, what I did was I cut out these 2 images. So as I mentioned, to save some time, I've got that done ahead of time. So I got the 2 tall planters from that and this image from that. And this will still be perfect to use for our card. So I did that ahead of time. Now what I also wanted to do is add some dimension and texture to these planters. So I took one of the 3 folders that's part of the Basics 3D folders. You get 3 different images, and I took the one that's kind of got a floral print to it. I put both of these in here, closed it, and ran that through my die cutting machine and got those 2 to be texturized. So those 2 were textured in that fashion. So I'm going to replace these 2 with that. So those are done. So now onto more die cutting. So I mentioned these extra pieces. So I do have listed that it's optional to have some adhesive sheets. I like to use adhesive sheets when I'm working with this particular die. So what I did was I took some adhesive sheets. It's 1 inch by 3, and it comes 6 by 12. You get 12 of them in a package. And when I cut these down to size, I save every small piece because small pieces can be used for different projects. So what I'm going to do is peel the backing off. And when you peel this off, you can tell which one's the backing. It's the one without the adhesive. So I'm going to peel that off, and I'm going to put that on one end of this extra strip. And I'm going to do that for both of them. If you have, you can use different adhesives to adhere this. I just love using the adhesive sheet. Now when I flip this over, I'm going to place this image here. I'm going to place this image here, and then I'm going to get one more of these out of this piece and run that through my die cutting machine. Do the same for both of these, and when you do that, you will get, I don't think what did I do with the, oh, here they are. You will get, these will be your toss, you don't need those. And then these will be cut out. These will have an adhesive sheet. When you peel that backing off, they're adhesive on the back. And that will be the same for these. So when we get ready to assemble those, as I mentioned, I used these also. I took this one and I cut out this die Now I don't need this to be really long, so I just cut both of them out like that. And then what happened is I got these two. That's exactly what I want for my project. So that's how I got those images. And then for this piece, I did the smaller or the shorter planter. Now this piece is going to be dark in some areas. You might have a piece that's more white, lighter colors than the darker colors. You just decide where you want to place this. So you're going to get two of these out side by side, and again another one of these. If you want the planter lighter, put that down. And to save time, I have that already done. 2 planters and 2 more of these. So the only other thing I have left to talk about, I chose not to texturize this for my samples. Now I will, or for the card I'm going to assemble, I am going to bring this closer. Maybe you can see one of my samples I texturized the background matching this one, and this one I did not. You can choose which way you want to do that. I'm not going to texturize that, but I am going to texturize this piece. And the reason I texturize this piece right here, I'll show you on this sample, is because when you stamp your inside sentiment or sign your card, you don't want to go over too far, because if you close the card, you're going to see your writing or your sentiment here. So this is really kind of a decorative piece, but also a place to know where to stop writing, so your writing is not exposed when you close the card. So it's a dual purpose reason I did that. How I did that was I took the folder and I put just the edge of this postcard size in here. It's actually not really a postcard size, but it's 4 by 5 1/4. Put it in my platform this direction and texturize just a portion of that. And I did that ahead of time, and I also stamped the sentiments here. So I did a lot of prep work ahead of time to save some video time. So now we are to the point of assembly. There's one more thing I would like to do. I would like to add some color to these planters to add the depth of that texture. So what I'm going to do is bring in a clear black, bring in my ink and a sponge dauber. I'm just going to tap a little bit of ink on here. Pretty Peacock's a dark color. So then I'm going to bring in a clear black and just kind of tap some of that ink off so I can get less color, but still helps me control a little bit of that color to tap that off. Then I just lightly go over here and add color to this. Now, it depends on how much color you want to add. If you want to go darker, you can. And then I'm going to pick up a little bit more color here, and you just decide how dark you want this to be. And you can use any different texturizing folders. There's so many possibilities. But by adding the color, it just pops out that and gives it more dimension. So now I think we're ready to assemble. And anytime I stamp, I get ink on my fingers, but that's how it is, and that's totally okay. So now what I'm going to do is assemble the card. I'm going to start out by putting this layer down first. So I'm going to turn this over, put my adhesive on here, and I'm using the Stampin' Seal. Everybody has their favorite adhesives. So I'm going to rotate this. I like to rotate it because I like to look at all 3 sides here. So I'm really looking at the top, the bottom, and the right side of the card to get equal spacing. And I have this part adhered. Now what I'm going to do is close this. The first thing I'm going to do is adhere my white to my Lost Lagoon. I'm going to do that first. So I'm going to, I always want to mention, put your adhesive on the smaller layer as you're layering pieces together. That way you can control where your adhesive is. If you put it on the top or the larger layer like the Lost Lagoon, you don't want it to go over so far that it's exposed. That's why I start with the smaller and work my way. So now I can rotate or turn this over, put adhesive on the back of this. And here we have those cutouts. Once we put this together, no one's going to even know that we've done that. It's the beauty of maximizing your paper. Now what I'm doing now is also looking at this edge and that edge for placing this piece down. So I like to do that when I place this down. I'm not sure if I used to crease that. So now we have this portion down. So the first thing I like to do, I'm going to get this out of the way. I'm done stamping. I think I'll leave that here. We'll get that out of the way. We'll get to all these pieces. We have 2 of everything. I'm just going to assemble 1 card for the video. The next one will be identical. The first thing I put on is this piece. So what I'm going to do is put that piece on, and how I assemble this is with 1 single dimensional. I put 1 dimensional right here. It is a strong adhesive. It is not going to go anywhere. So what I'm going to do is just turn it on an angle a little bit and just make sure that I stay within the border of my card. Now I'm moving it over this way a little bit because I already know that, I'll bring this sample in if you can't see that. I already know that I want this planter over here. I need space over here for the rest of the images. So what I'm going to do is now just put this on with my Stampin' Seal. So I'm going to use my silicone craft mat. And this is why that stem didn't need to be as long as the die is, because we're going to cover that up and no one's going to know that that's cut short. So the next thing I do is I get these 3 pieces. So we have 2 of everything. So that's for the second card. Let's separate this. I kind of feel really unorganized, but sometimes that happens. So these 3 are going to go on here, this planter and those 2. All of these are for the card number 2. The second card. So what I'm going to do is take this image. Now I just found that I like to adhere this with the planter that's going to go down next. So let's talk about that planter that's going to go down next. These 3 images are going to go in that planter. These extra pieces are decorative, but they also, this is decorative, but this also helps you increase the size of this planter. So what I'm going to do is first put this piece on. So sometimes your die is not going to cut out all of those images. Did you see all those pieces were still there? It's because it's still stuck to the paper. So if you just peel that paper off, most of the time they come right off with that. You don't have to worry about poking them all out. Now I'm going to place this on here. Then I'm going to bring in my paper snips and cut this off. If you turn it upside down, this blade can follow the edge of the planter and cut those pieces off. Okay, now this also has adhesive sheet behind it. So what I'm going to do is take this backing off. And now I'm using the silicone craft mat, which works out good. Now what I'm doing is I'm lining it up so the bottom here overlaps a little bit until it's the same width as the planter. And it overlaps just a little bit once you get that length. But here's where dimensionals come into play. I'm going to put that dimensional so it overlays the cardstock and the designer series paper. And I'm going to put 2 of them so they meet here. I'm going to put 2 on the bottom. And then I'm going to put 2 more in the middle. You might be thinking, oh, she's putting a lot on. She might not need that many. But there's 2 reasons I'm putting that many on. One is for keep it up, dimensionalized. But also this adhesive also is going to be the adhesive that holds these pieces down. So what I'm going to do is get this one ready. I'll get the backings off. And there's many ways of doing projects, and this is how I like to do mine. So I'm going to take this one. This one's going to hide behind this one. So that's going to keep it, it's not adhering it, it's just hiding back there. Then I'm going to take this one, and you know what, I usually put that one, but because this is darker, the paper is variegated, depends on what section you cut that out of. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this one over this way. It's a lighter, contrast better. And then I'm going to put the dark one right here. I could flip this around. You could overthink all of this. But what I'm going to do by doing this is all of these stems come down here. And I'm all thumbs right now, right? What this is, all of that dimension, all those dimensionals are going to secure these pieces in place. So now what I can do is put this down, and all those dimensionals are going to hold those three pieces. It caught a little bit of this guy in the back, it caught a little bit more of that, and caught that stem there. So they are not going anywhere, they're adhered across there. But so that is the assembly of this card. So repeat that for everything else to make 2 of these cards per this packet. Now, I tried to utilize everything that I provided to my qualifying customers and to my team members so they could duplicate these cards, but I do want to show you a sample with the oxidized copper paper. This paper is absolutely beautiful. I will put the code number for this. I have a 3 by 12 inch strip. The paper comes 12 by 12, you get 2 each, and this is pretty peacock in copper. It goes so pretty with this color. So if you substitute this die for this paper, one of these dies, one of them for this paper, and the planter for that paper, look at how beautiful any of the specialty paper is. So it's the same card, specialty paper, but you could use this with gold, you could use this with any of our beautiful specialty papers. Just add so much more. I hope you enjoyed these World Card Making Day cards, and happy creating today. If you have not subscribed to my YouTube channel, I would love to have you subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you do not have a demonstrator you're working with, I would love to have you contact me. If you're interested in being a demonstrator, we have an amazing starter kit program or special going on right now. Please reach out to me with any questions, and have a great day. Take care and happy creating.